There too. think if I, let's see, figure out where to put it best that'll. How's that?
That's good for me. You look great. I'm gonna just do a little intro here, and then we'll get kicked off.
Perfect.
The banter, of course, is a little, just a reminder about the background on the show. It's a new show that I have, a lot of people who've done amazing things in their life, you being one of those, but the show is really about the adversity story. And so I would really want to focus on, that particular story, because that's the takeaway I want people to have, when you were told by the doctors, it ain't going to happen again. That's when I read that, I went, that's my girl. We need her on, because it's Mission Impossible. Okay, I'll kick it off now. Hello, everyone. This is Coach MJ on the air. I'm live on Mission Impossible. Tonight, we're going to meet someone who is no stranger to winning, no stranger to the sports world. She's won over 35 world records, medals. She's an Olympic gold medalist. But moreover, she's got a story to share with us on Mission Impossible. I'm going to take no more time to introduce Nikki Stone. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, how are you? It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. I really thank you for coming in and out of your busy schedule and helping to inspire our listeners on your great story. I was checking out some of the excerpts today of your book. I think you wrote this book 10 years ago, When Turtles Fly. I love the cover. I just think that's great. And of course, the metaphors, the takeaways, and the amazing people that you had a chance to download their stories and really interview them and get them to share. That was pretty cool too. Tell me, how did you get started with the book first?
Well, the genesis of the book started when I was speaking. I do motivational speaking, and I had so many people come up to me afterwards and saying, you should share your story. I can relate to it this way. And no matter which field people were in that I was speaking to, they all felt this parallel and connection. And so I wanted to have a book that shared people from all different backgrounds, from Tommy Hilfiger to Dr. Stephen Covey to Shaun White, and to be able to get the story in their voices, to be able to share how they used the turtle effect, which is something that I grew up with, because when I was little, at 5 years old, I told my parents I was going to win the Olympics someday. And they never laughed at me, never told me it wasn't possible, but they told me that I had to follow my dreams by acting like a turtle. And they called it the turtle effect. They said, in order to be successful, you have to be soft on the inside, you have to have a hard shell, and you have to be willing to stick your neck out. And throughout my career, I used this in order to achieve my Olympic medal. And I found that in many different fields, we all have to find that turtle. And so that's where I came up with When Turtles Fly, Secrets of Successful People Who Know How to Stick Their Necks Out, because I had 40 people from all different backgrounds that all really did know how to stick their necks out.
That's awesome. And what a great metaphor. 5 years old, Nikki, really? 5 years old?
I saw Nadia Comaneci score a perfect 10 in gymnastics, and I was like, I want to do that. That looks pretty fun. So I built my own podium out of tables and chairs and stood on top. And that's when I said, I'm going to win the Olympics someday.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure that makes everybody's hair go up on their skin. It certainly did to me when I heard you say that. And I can imagine a 5-year-old wide-eyed, having no idea what's possible, what's not possible, declaring, that's my vision. I see it. That's what I'm going to do. And you built the podiums to practice your acceptance speech.
Exactly. I thought of my anthem playing for me. And, 22 years later, I got the reality, and, listening to my anthem play, I couldn't help but have tears well up in my eyes. My hair on the back of my neck stood on end as they put the medal around my neck. And to have that dream become a reality 20 some odd years later, it really showed me the drive I had, and really the support I had from my parents, because there's not many kids that say, I'm going to go out there and do this outlandish thing, and have their parents say, okay, I believe you can do it.
I would say, I'm just trying to do the math here. There's about 7+ billion people on the planet. If we take the law of percentages on how many people win a gold medal, and then we divide that by the population, I think that's a lot of zeros in the
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, I that's one thing I share on the back cover of my book is that you're more likely to win the lottery than the Olympics. And
oh, you know what? I think I read that from you. That's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So it was certainly an honor and something that I cherish.
yeah. Well, I mean, we're all. In fact, I remember these Olympics and this award and you, and so many years later, I now I have a chance to. I had to let Letterman and all these other people talk to you first, just to kind of get out there. And now you're here on Mission Impossible. So we're really flattered.
I had to work up the ranks.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're just really grateful that you're here. And Nikki, looking at your career, and I was reading about you. I mean, you're somebody who's on Wikipedia. There's a lot of information on the internet about you. One of the things that we wanted to speak to you about tonight was, of course, having the great medal put around your neck and having all these other accolades were all really nice, wonderful, fantastic. But there was a particular dark day on your journey where maybe you were told possibly this might not ever happen. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I actually had a what I thought was a muscle spasm at the time. And, with aerial skiing, we go off these jumps, flipping and twisting off a 10-foot tall ramp, flip and twist up to 50 feet in the air and land on a 45-degree steep hill. And you're doing this time and time again. And so I started feeling this muscle spasm throughout the year, 2 years before the next Winter Olympic Games. And I wanted to be first in the world, and the girl who was in first place in the world didn't make it to finals. So I knew it was my chance to be able to pull ahead of her in a contest in Germany. And in the practice, I felt this great pain in my back on my first jump. And I went to the bottom of the hill, I collapsed and found that I couldn't bend forward in order to stand up. And my physical therapist came over to me after a while and said, "There's 5 minutes left of training. What do you want to do?" And I looked him straight in the eyes and I said, "I want to jump." And he literally had to pick me up onto my feet because I couldn't bend forward in order to stand up. And I went back to the top of the hill, with tears streaming down my face. I went and took another jump. And little did I know it would be the last jump I take for a long time. Because as I went off the apex, the peak of the jump, I felt like I had 10 knives stabbing me in my lower back. And it's the type of pain that would drop someone to their knees. And I was 35 feet in the air upside down. And I don't know how, but when your life's in jeopardy, your body goes into autopilot. And I managed to get around to my feet. And this time on impact, I just collapsed. There was no way I'd be able to hold my body up with that type of pain I had. And I slid to the bottom of the hill and found that I couldn't move more than 2 inches in any direction. And when I finally did go and see the doctors, I went and saw 10 different doctors. And each doctor told me that the injury I had was called a internal disc disruption. And they said I basically scrambled the inside of my back like an egg. And then the outside it had leaks and it was malformed and it was pressing on nerves. And each of the 10 doctors I saw told me that, "Nikki, you're never going to jump again. And in all likelihood, you'll never go back to skiing again." And this was telling this to a girl who had a dream for 20 plus years about going and winning an Olympic medal. And it was devastating. I hit such a rock bottom, to a point where I was depressed. I tried every exercise and procedure possible, including injections put into my back to try to rejuvenate the nerves. They did acupuncture, massage therapy, physical therapy. They even went to the point where they were going to burn the nerves in my back to take away the pain because I couldn't sit for more than half an hour or stand for more than 5 minutes. And I really started to spiral down, and I didn't know if I'd be able to come back to any sport at that point.
Nikki, can I just ask you a question? Did these doctors, you say you saw 10 different doctors, obviously you didn't like what the first one said or the second one or the third one, so I can do the math. But did any of them tell you that, well, you see, young lady, it's because of the sport that you do and the body wasn't made to do what you do. And so you basically, through your sport, you've done it to yourself. Did they make you believe this?
Oh, most definitely. My injury actually wasn't from a crash. It was from the compression of landing my jumps over time. So I was actually doing too well in the sport, and all the compression, you're going 50 feet in the air, landing, jumps time and time again, was compressing the discs in my back. And it was one of the greatest reasons they said, you're not coming back to the sport. And for me, it was never a question. And so I said, okay, this doctor says no, I'm going to the next. And this doctor says no, I'm going to the next. And it was finally the 11th doctor I saw. And he said, I think you can come back from this injury, but it was going to take a big risk. And it wasn't only a risk on my part, it was a risk on his part too, because I could seriously injure myself and blow out my disc completely. So he had to take the risk in telling me to lift heavy weights to build up the muscles in my back to support those injured discs.
Which is counterintuitive, of course.
Exactly. And it was incredibly painful. And he told me it's going to be painful. It's going to be a big risk. And the one thing that helped me get through it was a quote by General George S. Patton that I read that said, "Success is how high you bounce when you hit rock bottom." And I used to take a super ball with me, and every day I'd go into the gym, I'd bounce that super ball and remind myself to have that turtle's hard outer shell. And that way I could bounce back and be ready for it. And so I knew I had to be strong, and I'd push through that excruciating pain and, think about that medal. I was always had that goal in mind. I was always thinking about what I could achieve, how I could win that medal, to be able to push myself to go out there and achieve something greater than many people thought was possible.
Awesome. And I mean, just to get to, how long did it take you from the 11th doctor visit through whatever therapy, the lifting of weights, the working out? How many days?
Well, from injury to back on the hill again, it took almost a year to be able to come back. And, there were phases all along the way that I kept going in order to achieve that Olympic medal. And it was incredibly hard for me to go through a lot of those days. It wasn't always easy. There were days where I did feel like giving up. There were days that I would cry every morning that I got up. And, one day I just said to myself, I got to stop feeling sorry for myself, because no one's going to get through this but you. And we all want that quick fix. We want the one thing that's going to be able to help us come back from something. We want the one job that's going to give us all this money, the one pill that's going to help us lose all this weight. And the real truth is it lies within each of us. And the only way to make that happen is to start with yourself. And, they can be small steps, doing small things in the right direction. But we have to realize that all the effort is going to start with what you put onto the table.
Yeah. And, great words of advice today, but just going back, I'm going to let's say, go into day 180. So you're halfway through your journey back to the hill. And I'm just going to ask you, I mean, were you seeing any friends, other family? Did anybody come up to you and say, well, Nikki, maybe, for your benefit, maybe it's just not meant to be?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing I felt is that there were a lot of people that just gave up. There were people that saw that I couldn't go out there and achieve something. And for me, it made me want to fight harder. I remember there was a sports journalist who came out with an article of the athletes he thought would medal in 1998. And my name wasn't on it. And not only was my name on it, he wrote that Nikki Stone will never stand on the podium again. And it gave me that fire and that feeling like, well, all right, I'm going to prove you wrong. And it was probably the biggest blessing I could have gotten, because it was that extra jolt I needed in order to go out there and prove some of these naysayers wrong, prove those 10 different doctors wrong, and show them that, they weren't talking to, someone who is going to back down at the thought of defeat. It was something that was just going to compel me to try harder.
Where did you get this incredible tenacity, this pugnaciousness that you have? How did you get all this? I mean, is this part of your DNA? I got the 5-year-old girl thing, but 10 doctors saying no, one doctor saying it's a risk, and you taking a leap of faith to try to do that. What was driving you, really?
Well, if you asked thousands of people if they would go off a jump, flipping and twisting 50 feet in the air, how many of them do you think would say yes? And
when I was reading about the sport, I went, what? 10, go into that 10 feet jump and then 50 feet in the air, then twist, then twirl, and then land on a 45-degree. What? Are you kidding? And that's a sport?
Right.
Wow.
And so I knew if I had the ability to push myself to be able to do the sport, and believe it or not, I'm afraid of heights. So it was terrifying for me, you know, but when I had to do triple backflips, I would go in the woods and throw up and then go back out to the hill and take my jump. And that was how scared I was. And so I knew if I had, you know, that drive and that urge to go out there and succeed, I could come back from this injury. And it was something that it was just going to take time. It was going to take the right support system, the right people behind me. And really that drive of the 5-year-old who would make her own podium to say she was going to win the Olympics someday.
Wow. Nikki, did you use any other tools? Did you do meditation, or did you use guided visualization? Were you using any of those kinds of tools throughout your healing journey?
Yeah, I did a lot at the end was a lot of visualization. You know, imagining myself doing it perfectly hundreds of times. Because of my back injury, I couldn't jump as much as I used to be able to. And so I would go and stand in front of the jump and I'd close my eyes and imagine myself going off the jump, doing it perfectly. And I would move my arms around in the position I would do and everything. And then I'd imagine standing at the edge of the hill and finishing my jump. And with visualization, I've come to learn, I actually had a undergraduate in psychology, and I have a master's in sports psychology. And I used so much of what I learned through the field. And it really helped me because I could do a lot of that visualization. I could understand that it took more than just seeing it perfectly. I had to feel it all. I had to imagine the crowds at the bottom of the hill. I had to imagine everything working perfectly for me, the smells that would be there, put myself in that situation. And, you know, one of the biggest factors in my second Olympic Games, my first Olympic Games, I actually finished in 13th place when 12 people make it to finals. And I was ranked 3rd in the world at the time. So it was a big defeat for me. And what I learned is it wasn't possible for me to make the Olympics like every other day, because it's not. It's a different event. It's bigger. It's grander. You achieve greater things from it. And so instead, I tried to make every day the Olympics. You know, I would put the pressure on myself. Every day I would go into practice and try to imagine it was the Olympic Games. And if I was feeling sick, if the weather was bad, if I had the wrong equipment, I would still go out there and compete like it was the Olympics. So I'd be ready for any adversity that was thrown my way.
Whoa, I'm just blown away by this amazing attitude that you had and probably still do have, because today as a motivational speaker, you've been helping, empowering organizations and people all around the world based on the experiences and the mindset that you were able to derive from all your training. Before I get into my next segment question, I'm going to ask you this. How long was the event where you actually did the 10 feet inside, then 50 feet in the air, then twist, swirl, and come back down on the 45-degree slant? How long does that event take? How many seconds?
Well, believe it or not, it's only about 3 seconds. And we get 2 jumps in semis and 2 in finals. And a lot of people think, well, that's great. You get it over with quickly. You don't have to go through a whole marathon to find out how you do. But you 1 millisecond goes wrong and you lose an Olympic medal. Your medal was out of your grasp because you've just wasted that millisecond. And so you have to be on every single millisecond that you're going through these jumps. And if not, you're waiting another 4 years to the next Olympic Games. And I didn't have another 4 years because this was my last shot with my spinal injury.
And being one of the most winning world-class skiers ever, and having that event, which takes less than 15 seconds, if you say 3, okay. But at the end of the day, how many hours did it take you to prepare for those critical seconds that got you the gold?
Yeah, endless number of hours. You know, this was my job. It was, you wake up at 6 in the morning and you go for a run, then you lift weights, then you go out and train on the hill, you go on trampolines. You know, it was more than a 9-to-5 job. You know, it's 6 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, going through every single part of it. And, you know, that's why I tell people to make sure with that turtle that you have that soft inside, because if you don't have passion for what you're doing, if you don't love what you're doing, those extra times before you achieve that greatness is really going to be thrown out the door, because you have to make sure that you're finding a way to love all the hard times, love what's going to push you through. And it's the thing that's going to, you know, make you want to stay on that path when you are hit with a number of hurdles and adversities.
Any books that you read that inspired you along the way in your journey as a teenager or as a young athlete?
Yeah, there were a number of books, you know, a lot within sports psychology, and there were a lot of athletes that really inspired me. And, you know, two of those athletes were actually speed skaters, and they're friends of mine now. One was Bonnie Blair and one was Dan Jansen. And, you know, I'd read articles, you know, that they had gone through, even to the point where Bonnie Blair said she ate peanut butter, you know, the morning of competitions because it gave her protein and it was a little bit of extra luck. And I got up the morning Olympics and I said, I got to eat peanut butter and jelly because Bonnie Blair did it. But, you know, I looked at Dan Jansen and how much he had lost. You know, he had lost his daughter with cancer, and his sister, excuse me, he lost his sister with cancer, you know, right before the Olympic Games. And so much was defeated and so much pressure was put on him. And for him to be able to come back from that and to be able to go out there and achieve a medal when he'd had so many defeats leading up to that, you know, really for me, it was such a drive. And, you know, I look to some of these top athletes, people in the business world, you know, so many people that are in my book, you know, are all different role models and people that I'd looked up to, you know, reading their books and their stories and trying to incorporate that into my message and understanding of what I could go out there and achieve if I set my mind to it.
So there is, in your opinion, then, there is a DNA strand, if you will, or an algorithm to winning. Is that right?
Well, I think there are a lot of elements that work for you. You know, it all starts with having the proper mindset and putting yourself in the elements that are going to help you achieve greatness. And I think we all can achieve so much more than we actually know. If we push ourselves beyond what we think is possible. You know, I always say, you know, reach for the stars, because if you're just reaching, you know, for the outer limits, you're really not going to be able to get beyond them. And so it's something that you have to know that everything's possible. So mission impossible, to go out there and push yourself, because you're only going to achieve what you set your goals to. You know, if you sit there and say, I want to go out there and I want to make it onto the US ski team, that's probably as far as you're going to go. And if you go out there and say,
by the way, that's a pretty darn lofty ambition right there, just to
yeah,
make it to the U.S. Olympics.
and it is, and for some people that is a goal that they're driving for. But if they want to push themselves to achieve something greater, then they have to dream of it. And it's one thing I learned with sports psychology is the people that are most successful are always pushing for higher things. So if you don't achieve every goal you've ever set out for, it's okay. And if you reach all of them, it means you probably didn't set your goals high enough. You know, like Bonnie Blair is a friend of mine, and we went to an event and I pulled my medal out of my box and she pulled a suitcase out with all her medals. And so there's always things greater that you can achieve. So we have to keep pushing ourselves and understand that sometimes we're not going to reach those goals, but if we don't push beyond, you know, the lower levels, that's all we're going to go to.
Well said. I'm going to ask you now just to kind of comment, because we're taping the show in the midst of COVID, which has taken over the planet and disrupted the lives of normalcy. And today, more people are lost about what's going to happen in the future and what's going to be their world 6 months from now, a year from now. What advice could you give people who are looking for answers?
Yeah, and I can relate, you know, just because I've had greatness on the athletic field or in a athletic classroom or even speaking doesn't mean that I don't have hurdles and adversities and challenges myself. And so I'm in the same boat with everyone else. And the thing I try to do is keep that positivity and keep pushing myself. You know, I was in a contest in Iwashiro, Japan, and it was my first year on the tour. And we went out to compete, and the weather was terrible. They didn't know if they wanted to hold the contest, and a fog had settled over the site. And they decided they were just going to hold the women's contest. And when I went up to take my first jump, I looked down at the hill and I saw that the jump was under a fog. So you couldn't even see the jumps from where we were standing. And so I turned to a girl that was next to me, a girl named Natalia Orakova, and I said, you know, what do we do? We can't even see the jumps. And she said, don't worry, you'll see it when you get to it. And it was this blind faith that you had to go down and just understand that if you're going to take this leap of faith, it's going to be there for you. But you can't find that unless you actually push off and go down the hill. And sure enough, I realized, I committed to this. I wanted to win a World Cup at the time. And I thought, I'm not going to be doing it from sitting on the sidelines. And so I pushed off, and sure enough, you'd get about 25 feet in front of the jump, and you could make out the lines of the jump, and you would go flip and twist into the fog or the clouds in the sky. And about an hour and a half after that first jump, I went out there and I won my first World Cup. And I realized how important it was to, even though we can't see the answers, and it's really true with COVID, there's so many unknowns right now. But we have to have faith that we're going to go out there and push ourselves and push through that fog. Because if you want to sit back and relax, that's all you're going to get is a good little rest. But if you want to go out there and achieve something great, it's only going to happen if you push off and go down that hill.
And to be a reminder to the beginning of your talk today with us, to be a turtle. And the 3 things that a turtle does, can you remind us again?
Yes, you have to have a soft inside, you have to have a hard shell, and you have to be willing to stick your neck out. And so that was one of my moments of sticking my neck out. And, I've had to do it time and time again within my sport. And it's really helped me excel and understand, different ways that I could achieve greatness.
That's awesome. How's the speaking world for you now that crowds are not really happening? So it's more turned into the virtual world these days. How do you see that field happening in the next year?
Speeches are scarce, but I have full faith that they're going to return. We are social creatures, and we need inspiration. We need things to push us forward and have that understanding. And the greatest part of my job is to be able to take that and share it with others. It's great to have something, that you're successful with it yourself, but to be able to share that success and see other people thrive under those conditions, is the best part of my job. And I have full faith that it will return. It's going to take a little time. There are some speeches I've done online, but it's nothing like being able to see the audience and seeing it impact people and have them come up to you afterwards and say they're going to change something in their life because of something you said. Yeah,
that's a very rewarding part of it, I'm sure. Nikki, our takeaway with you today is, of course, not just being an Olympic winner, not just being a world record setter, but the amazing tenacity that you had to fire 10 doctors who gave you the wrong answer, to hire the 11th, to continue to go on, to take risks, to stick your neck out, to believe in your dream that you had seen when you were 5 years old, practiced on homemade pedestals, and put yourself out there. And you decided what you were going to do long before you did it. To anybody out there who's listening tonight, what would you want them to remember about your talk tonight? What other advice could you add?
The only thing I would say is go find that turtle. Make sure you love whatever you're doing, have that soft inside. You need the hard shell. It's something that you do have to build up, and you have to make sure that there are going to be a million things thrown at you. My son has type 1 diabetes, and I constantly remind him that everyone has something in their life. And you can either be a victim to it, or you can make sure that you go and you conquer it. And he does that every single day. And it's something about sticking your neck out. And with my daughter, it's always showing her that there's something more she can do. And she's been state champion in both dance and gymnastics. And it's because she's constantly trying harder things than she originally thought was possible, because she keeps sticking her neck out. And that both my kids are continuing to build those turtles so they can go out there and make them soar as well.
Nikki Stone, words of great advice. You're an inspiration. How can people get in touch with you? How can we follow you?
They can go to my website, which is nikkistone.com, and I have all my links to my social media that they can go online and see that as well. And then when speaking returns, I'd love to find a place on their stage to be able to share my message with them as well.
Yep, and I'd love to be there too. Nikki Stone, thank you so much for sharing your valuable time with us. Best regards to your son and your daughter, and we'll see you on the other side of COVID, I'm sure.
I hope so. We push through that fog, right?
Be the mission and be I'm possible.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, dear. God bless.
Thank you too.